Ladies and gentlemen, you've been lied to. Not maliciously, not even consciously, but lied to nonetheless. Since the moment you could walk and speak, you've been handed a script. Be polite. Be nice. Don't make waves. Fit in. Achieve this. Avoid that. Become someone acceptable, respectable. Here's the truth. The life you were taught to build is too small for your soul. And if you're feeling restless, confused, or secretly suffocated, it's not because you're broken. It's because the role you've been playing is too limited for the truth of who you really are. That's why you must betray it. Yes? Betray the version of you they taught you to be. Because your breakthrough, your next level of existence, cannot be accessed with the same mind, same habits, same identity that kept you safe and compliant. Because what no one tells you is that growth feels like disloyalty, not to others, but to your former self. You will have to walk away from what is familiar. You will outgrow people who still believe in the old version of you. You will become misunderstood, not because you're wrong, but because you're finally real. And that's terrifying. But it's also liberation. You see, the self you were handed was a costume, stitched together by culture, family, trauma, and fear. But you are not here to play a part. You are here to live a truth. What do? You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop needing permission. And in that moment of still defiance, you wake up. You become less interested in being liked and more committed to being whole. You realize that the cost of pretending is far higher than the cost of truth. And from that realization, a quiet revolution begins inside you. Not loud, but irreversible. You break rules not for the sake of rebellion, but because your soul refuses to live in a box. You ask questions, not to be difficult, but because your spirit can no longer settle for borrowed beliefs. And you walk away, not in bitterness, but in freedom. This is not abandonment. This is resurrection, because every breakthrough demands the death of the false self. And every authentic life begins with a betrayal, not of others, but of who you were told to be. If you feel like your world is shaking, your identity unraveling, let it. But the shaking is sacred. The unraveling is the doorway. And what waits on the other side is you, the real you, the one they couldn't program, the one they couldn't predict, the one who is finally, unapologetically alive. You were molded, not made. Trained to conform, not to awaken. And for most of your life, you didn't even realize it. That's the beauty and the danger of conditioning. It's invisible. It doesn't ask for your permission. It quietly wraps around your thoughts, your behaviors, your sense of self, and it whispers, this is who you are. But that whisper isn't truth. It's just repetition. From childhood, you were given templates, ideas of who you should be, ideas shaped by your parents' fears, your teachers' expectations, your culture's demands. You were praised when you followed the rules, rewarded when you fit the mold. You were told to be obedient, to be agreeable, to be productive, all virtues of someone easy to manage. You learned quickly that love was conditional, belonging was earned, and safety was tied to staying small. You adapted. You trimmed the parts of yourself that didn't fit. You silenced the voice that questioned too much. You pushed away the instincts that felt too wild, too honest, too raw. And over time, you became a stranger to yourself, not because you lacked identity, but because your identity was edited. And then, one day, you started to feel it, not as a loud explosion, but as a quiet ache, the sense that something was off. a subtle friction between the life you were living and the life you felt was possible. Maybe it was in the way your spirit went numb in a job that only paid your bills but never sparked your soul. Maybe it was in the way you laughed around people who didn't really know you, afraid to show them who you were underneath the mask. Or maybe it came in the silence of your own mind, when all distractions faded and you were left alone with a version of yourself you didn't recognize. That ache, that quiet discomfort, it was your real self knocking from underneath the surface, trying to remind you that what you were taught is not who you are. See, conditioning is not identity, it's programming. You were trained, like a machine, to behave in certain ways, to believe certain things, to pursue specific dreams that weren't even yours to begin with. You were taught to live on autopilot, not to question the path, only to walk it. And the more you complied, the more praise you received. But praise is not the same as peace, and applause is not the same as alignment. Here's the truth most never tell you. The person you think you are is often a collection of other people's voices. Your doubts, inherited. Your fears, passed down. Your goals, projected onto you. So when you begin to feel the urge to change, to shift, to evolve, it can feel like a betrayal, but it's not betrayal. It's revelation, because beneath all that noise is you, the real you, the one who never needed to be trained, only remembered. And remembering starts when you stop defending your conditioning, when you allow yourself to question everything you were taught to believe about who you must be, how you must live, and what success even means. This doesn't mean your past was wrong. It means you've outgrown it. The tragedy is not in being conditioned. That's universal. The tragedy is in never questioning it, in living your entire life as an echo instead of a voice, in mistaking obedience for authenticity, in confusing fitting in with belonging. The first step is simple but profound. Separate what you were taught from what you know. Not what you were told to know, but what you feel in your bones. The kind of knowing that doesn't require proof or permission, only courage. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. You will feel guilt for letting go of who you were taught to be. You might grieve the identities you once clung to. You might face rejection, confusion, even loneliness. But that's the price of freedom. That's the cost of waking up. Because who you are becoming cannot coexist with who you were pretending to be. When you finally realize that conditioning is not identity, you begin to reclaim your life, piece by piece, breath by breath, choice by choice, until one day you look in the mirror and no longer see a reflection of expectations, but a revelation of truth. That's when you'll know you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to wake up. True growth does not come dressed in comfort. It does not come through polite obedience or quiet compliance. It does not come by nodding along with what you've been told, staying inside the lines drawn for you, or living a life based on how others see the world. Real growth, the kind that transforms you from the inside out, begins exactly where obedience ends. And that is a terrifying thing to admit, because for so long you were conditioned to believe that obedience equals goodness, that following the rules makes you righteous, that sticking to the script is honorable. But here's the truth. The script was never written with your freedom in mind. It was designed to keep things predictable, manageable, familiar. You were taught to avoid rocking the boat, to suppress the parts of yourself that seemed too bold, too wild, too different. You were trained to fit in, not to awaken. And so when the moment comes that your soul begins to stir, when something deep inside of you whispers, there must be more than this, it feels like you're doing something wrong. But you're not wrong. You're waking up. You see, there comes a point in every person's life where they must choose. stay loyal to the version of themselves that was crafted by others, or step into the unknown and become who they truly are. And that step, that leap into authenticity, feels like betrayal, because you are leaving behind identities that once protected you. You are questioning beliefs that once kept you safe. You are saying no to systems, people, and patterns that once defined your entire world. And when you do this, there is a grieving process. You grieve the certainty you once had, even if that certainty was built on lies. You grieve the relationships that can't follow you forward. You grieve the image of who you are supposed to be. But this is necessary, because you cannot carry the weight of your old self into your breakthrough. It will not fit. Your breakthrough demands space. It requires honesty. It insists that you trade illusion for truth. And that means you will have to leave behind the behaviors and mindsets that once earned you approval, even if that approval came at the cost of your authenticity. There is no growth without friction, no transformation without tension. You will feel like you are betraying people when you stop performing for them. You will feel like you are betraying your culture when you step outside of its expectations. You will feel like you are betraying your past when you decide to live for your future. But you're not betraying anyone, you're liberating yourself. The world is full of people who never reached their potential because they couldn't face this inner rebellion. They chose peace with others over peace with themselves. They chose to maintain the illusion rather than walk through the fire of becoming. But that's not the life you were meant to live. Growth requires rebellion, not for the sake of being defiant, but for the sake of being real, not to destroy everything around you, but to stop destroying yourself by pretending. You must rebel against the version of you that was designed to please, perform, and conform. You must rebel against the idea that your worth is found in obedience to outdated rules. You must rebel against the fear that tells you change is dangerous, when in reality it is divine. And here's the paradox. The more you betray who you were taught to be, the more you return to who you really are. That betrayal, it's sacred, it's necessary, it's a crossing over moment from who the world wanted you to be to who you were always meant to become. You will lose things on this journey, that is true. But you will find something far greater. You will find yourself. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the fear. Let go of the belief that growth must be painless. It won't be. But it will be worth it. Every uncomfortable conversation, every shift in perspective, every moment you choose truth over tradition, it will lead you to a freedom you've never known. And when you finally step into that freedom, when you no longer need permission to be real, you'll realize something powerful. You didn't betray anyone. You simply remembered who you were before the world taught you to forget. Comfort is seductive. It wraps around you like a warm blanket, promising safety, familiarity, and peace. And for a while, it feels good. To know your place, to follow the routine, to avoid risk. But what no one tells you is that comfort is also the cage, a quiet, invisible prison that slowly steals your hunger, your curiosity, and your spirit, all while convincing you that everything is just fine. But comfort is not always peace. Sometimes it's just the absence of growth disguised as stability. There's a reason why your spirit starts to itch in the middle of the life that once felt satisfying. There's a reason why the routine begins to feel more like repetition than rhythm. There's a reason why certain relationships, careers, or identities start to feel tight, as though you're wearing clothes you've long outgrown. That feeling isn't failure. It's not ingratitude. It's the early sign of evolution. Your soul is wired for expansion. It doesn't thrive on repetition. It thrives on challenge, on awakening, on pushing through the walls of what you thought was possible. And that expansion cannot and will not happen inside the confines of comfort. This is the dilemma. Everything you were taught told you to seek stability. Get the job, hold the image, keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. Don't take the risk. Don't walk away from what you've built, even if what you've built is slowly suffocating you. And so many people choose to stay still, not because they don't feel the urge to grow, but because they're terrified of the cost. But make no mistake, staying still has a cost too. It costs your potential. It costs your joy. It costs the life you could have had if only you were brave enough to let go of the life that no longer fits. Comfort numbs you to that cost. It dulls the ache with distractions and routines. It tells you you should be grateful. Others have it worse. And while that may be true, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to want more. It doesn't mean your longing for something greater is invalid. That whisper inside you, the one that says, there's more than this, is not ungrateful. It's sacred. But to answer that whisper, you must do something difficult. You must leave the cage. And leaving the cage is never easy, because you've grown accustomed to its walls. You know how to function inside of it. You know how to be liked, how to avoid conflict, how to stay safe. And out there, outside the cage, it's uncertain, it's unknown, it's uncomfortable. But here's the truth most people avoid. Your breakthrough lies in that discomfort. Not on the other side of the pain, it's in the pain. It's not after the fear, it's through it. You don't get to transformation by staying where it's easy. You reach it by being willing to be stretched, to be challenged, to be completely undone. Discomfort is the past. It is not the enemy. It is the teacher. And every time you resist that path, every time you retreat back into the known, back into the predictable, you reinforce the very walls that are holding you captive. You reinforce the belief that comfort is more valuable than growth, that safety is more important than purpose, that surviving is more noble than thriving. But eventually something shifts. Something in you breaks, not in a destructive way, but in a liberating one. You realize that the discomfort of staying stuck is worse than the fear of moving forward. And that's when you make the choice to walk into the unknown, not because you're fearless, but because you're done being controlled by fear. You stop negotiating with your comfort zone. You stop explaining away your hunger. You stop trying to make the cage feel like home. And in that moment, you begin the journey. A journey that doesn't promise ease, but does promise truth. A path that doesn't guarantee applause, but does guarantee alignment. You begin to feel alive again, not because it's painless, but because it's real. If you find yourself restless, uncomfortable, uncertain, don't numb it. Don't silence it. Lean into it. That's your sign. That's your soul tapping on the inside of the cage, asking to be let out. And when you answer, when you finally step beyond what's familiar, you don't just find growth, but you find yourself. You were not born to be a copy of someone else's expectations. You were not placed on this earth merely to fulfill roles that others designed for you, or to wear masks that keep the peace but silence your spirit. And yet, from an early age, most of us are handed a blueprint, a script for how to live, how to behave, how to succeed, how to belong. Follow the rules. Don't speak too loudly. Be agreeable. Achieve the milestones. And most of all, don't question too much. What happens? We absorb it. We internalize it. We play the part. We become actors in a life that's not truly ours. And while this may buy us acceptance, it also steals something far more precious. Our truth. Erosions, that's the hidden cost of compliance, the slow erosion of who you really are. Every time you silence your instincts to maintain harmony, every time you swallow your voice to fit in, every time you override your own wisdom to make someone else comfortable, you chip away at the core of your being. It's subtle, it's almost invisible, but over time, it becomes suffocating. Eventually you look in the mirror and see a version of yourself you barely recognize. You become so busy fulfilling expectations that you forgot how to listen to your own. So busy being what others needed you to be that you stopped asking what you need to be. This disconnection from the authentic self is what creates that deep inner ache, the restlessness, the anxiety, the sense that something is missing, even when on paper everything looks fine. Here's the truth that most people don't want to confront. Your authentic self cannot be fully expressed inside someone else's design. The truth of who you are will eventually collide with the lie of who you were taught to be. And when that happens, when that collision comes, you'll be faced with a choice. Remain loyal to the script or burn it. But burning the script feels dangerous. It feels like rebellion, like betrayal. Because you've spent years earning love and approval through performance. You've been rewarded for being who they wanted. To choose your truth now, to peel back the layers and say, this is who I really am, means risking the loss of that approval. And that's terrifying. But here's the quiet secret hiding beneath the fear. Anything that requires you to betray your truth, to be accepted, was never love. It was control. And freedom can only begin when control ends. To reclaim your identity, you must first become aware of how much of it was never yours to begin with. How many of your goals, your values, your fears were planted in you, not chosen by you? How much of your personality was shaped by survival, by fitting in, by avoiding rejection? And then comes the real work, unlearning. Unlearning is not about rejecting your past or blaming others. It's about seeing clearly. It's about sorting through the parts of you that are borrowed, inherited, or forced, and having the courage to let them go. It's about asking yourself, with radical honesty, is this belief mine, or did I just adopt it because I was told? And when you start asking those questions, everything shifts. You begin to realize how often you've said yes when you meant no, how often you've smiled through discomfort, how often you've chased goals that weren't aligned with your soul simply because they looked impressive from the outside. That awareness is the beginning of freedom. You don't owe anyone the version of you they created in their mind. You don't owe your past a lifetime of loyalty. You don't have to live according to a template just because it's familiar. The moment you realize you are allowed to choose, that you can rewrite the story, you start to take your power back. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. People may not understand. Some may feel threatened. You might even doubt yourself at first, but the deeper you go into the process, the more you'll begin to breathe. Not just shallow, surface-level breaths. The deep, full, soul-satisfying breaths that come from living in alignment with who you truly are. There is nothing more courageous than becoming yourself in a world that profits from your conformity. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never again be content living according to someone else's expectations, because the cost is too high, because your truth is too sacred, and because your life was never meant to be a performance. It was meant to be a revelation. It's a strange thing how easily people confuse obedience with goodness. From a young age, we're conditioned to believe that being liked, being accepted, even being seen as mature, comes down to one thing: compliance. Follow the rules, do as you're told, don't question authority, don't challenge the system. Sit down, be quiet, and smile. We learn We learn to bite our tongue when something feels off. We learn to suppress our instincts in favor of pleasing others. We learn to ignore the still, small voice inside of us, the one that says, this isn't right, or this isn't who I am. All for the sake of fitting in. And we're praised for it. We're rewarded for being agreeable, for not making waves, for staying in line. But what if the line is going in the wrong direction? What if the system you were taught to follow is broken? What if the rules you were told to obey are not rooted in truth or justice, but in fear, control, and stagnation? What if compliance, the very thing you were praised for, is the very thing holding you back? This is the moment when something deep within you starts to wake up. It's uncomfortable at first. It doesn't come with clarity. It comes with tension, with restlessness, with the uneasy awareness that you've spent years wearing a version of yourself that was never fully yours. You've nodded in agreement with things that didn't sit right with your spirit. You've silenced your intuition in favor of keeping the peace. But peace without truth is just quiet submission. Your soul starts to rebel, not in an angry, dramatic way, but in a subtle, persistent way. You start to question what you were told. You begin to notice the cracks in the structure. You start to feel the weight of all the things you never said, all the truths you never lived. This is not disobedience for the sake of rebellion. This is awakening, because real growth requires the courage to challenge what no longer resonates. It demands that you not only ask hard questions, but that you listen to the answers, especially when they contradict everything you were taught. It requires that you step out of the comforting lie of this is how it's always been, and into the bold truth of this is who I really am. That journey is not smooth. It won't come with applause. It may feel like loss, the loss of certainty, of relationships built on roles you no longer play, of the comfort that came from fitting in. But what you gain is far more powerful. You gain clarity. You gain alignment. You gain yourself. You begin to live from your center instead of your conditioning. You speak not to please, but to be honest. You act not out of obligation, but out of integrity. You stop asking for permission to be who you are, and you stop giving explanations for why you've changed. People may not like it. That's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be real. And there's something sacred about a person who stops outsourcing their identity to the crowd, who no longer defines their worth by how well they follow a script, who chooses truth over approval, authenticity over performance, depth over image. This is what true rebellion looks like. It's quiet, it's internal, but it shifts everything. It breaks cycles, it awakens generations, it rewrites the narrative from the inside out. But you don't need to be loud to be powerful. You don't need to scream to be heard by your own soul. All you need is the courage to stop agreeing with what you no longer believe, to stop pretending that the old version of you still fits, to stop making yourself smaller just to keep other people comfortable. It's not your job to stay loyal to an identity that was shaped by fear. It's not your duty to defend a system that doesn't honor your truth. Your only real responsibility is to become who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. And when you begin to live that truth, without apology, without guilt, you become a mirror. Not everyone will like what they see, but some will. Some will see you and remember who they are, and in doing so, your quiet rebellion becomes a lighthouse, not because you shouted, but because you dared to live awake. There comes a moment in every person's life when the illusion of stability begins to fracture, not always in grand, dramatic ways, but quietly. subtly, a conversation that doesn't sit right, a job that no longer inspires, a relationship where you feel unseen. These small fractures are not random. They are signals, markers that whisper, this version of you is no longer enough. Not because you failed, but because you've grown. And growth, at its deepest level, demands departure. It is natural to outgrow what once felt like home. Natural, but not always easy. Because what we outgrow is often not just a set of habits or routines, but entire identities. Personas carefully constructed over years, roles assigned to us by family, culture, or circumstance, expectations we dutifully carried, even when they weighed down our joy. When the soul begins to rise, when your deeper self starts pulling you towards something more real, more honest, more expansive, it does not feel like enlightenment. It feels like loss. The world you built with such careful planning no longer fits. The people you surrounded yourself with may no longer recognize you. The ambitions that once burned so brightly begin to dim. And this is where many retreat, because the idea of stepping into the unknown feels far more terrifying than remaining in the safety of what's familiar, even if that safety is suffocating. The mind clings to the known, even when the known has become a cage. Better the devil you know, they say. But what they forget is that staying too long in what you've outgrown becomes its own kind of death, a slow withering of the soul. The truth is, breakthrough never arrives wrapped in comfort. It comes disguised as discomfort, as confusion, as disruption. It doesn't ask for permission. It crashes through the door and dismantles the old scaffolding of your life. And what it offers in return is not a neat little answer, but an invitation to become, to evolve, to step into the next, truer version of yourself. But to accept that invitation, you must do something most people avoid. You must be willing to let go of who you were. Not because who you were was wrong or bad, but because it was a stepping stone, not a destination. And clinging to a past identity out of nostalgia, fear, or pride will only prevent the fullness of who you are becoming. This is why breakthrough feels like betrayal, because in order to grow, you must betray the smaller version of yourself, the one who stayed quiet, the one who avoided risk, the one who made themselves smaller for the comfort of others. You must break the loyalty you once had to limitations that no longer serve you. People won't always understand. Some may question your shift. They will ask why you've changed, why you no longer show up the way you used to, why you've become distant or different. But what they don't see is that your silence is not absence. It's transformation. Your detachment is not coldness, it's clarity. You are not abandoning them. You are simply choosing not to abandon yourself anymore. This is the sacred rebellion, not against the world, but against the false self you were told to be. The self that was shaped to fit in, to please, to avoid discomfort. That version of you may have been necessary for survival, but now survival is not enough. Now it's time to live. So let it all fall apart if it needs to. Let the old systems crumble. Let the outdated labels dissolve. Don't resist the shedding. The more you release, the more room you create for the truth to rise. The truth of who you are without the performance, without the mask, without the conditioning. And know this, your breakthrough is not coming from the outside. It's coming from within. It's not something you achieve. It's something you allow. It begins the moment you stop clinging to who you think you should be and start honoring who you already are. That version of you, raw, unfiltered, alive, is waiting. Not in the distance, not after another 5 years of playing small, but now, right here, beneath the layers you've outgrown. Breakthrough is not an event. It is a choice to step away from the familiar edge of comfort and walk into the wild unknown of your becoming. And once you take that step, even if you're afraid, even if you tremble, life will meet you with the clarity, the energy, and the direction you've been searching for all along. You weren't born to be a replica of what the world told you to be. You weren't meant to live a life shaped entirely by fear, approval, or tradition. You are here to evolve, to rise. And that rising will require you to release the parts of yourself that were constructed only to survive. Your breakthrough won't come through more pretending, more performing, or more pleasing. It will come when you finally dare to disappoint the expectations placed upon you in order to fulfill the truth planted within you. This journey isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you've always been underneath the noise, the shedding, the silence, the stillness. They're not signs of you falling apart. They're the evidence of transformation, and the moment you stop waiting for permission to be real, the moment you stop apologizing for your growth, that's the moment everything begins to shift. You were taught to be small. You were trained to be obedient. But your soul was always meant to be free. And now, not tomorrow, not someday, but now is the time to break the contract with the false identity you inherited and write a new one, forged in truth, born of clarity and sustained by courage. Let the past version of you be honored for getting you this far. But don't mistake it for the destination. Your becoming starts when you stop trying to be who they said you should be and start embodying who you already are. Not everyone will understand your path, but it was never meant for them. It was meant for you. And it begins the moment you answer the quiet but undeniable call, become.